Because disco was so popular, other genres weren't as popular. With how much these records were selling, rock musicians and punk musicians were getting their record sales were being hurt.
Punk musicians shouldn't care about that by nature of being punk musicians.
Yeah, and the counterculture nature of both genres. But because of that, there was a lot of radio stations that became disco stations that were once rock radio.
How dare they?
I know, right? So when it switched over, there was one particular guy. I didn't even bother to write his name down. He ended up starting a group of people that were fighting against disco.
Is it Steve Dahl?
Yeah, Steve Dahl. That's the guy. He was staging protests and riots about disco music and really trying to they would go to disco gigs and everybody up, being really evil.
What a legacy to leave.
And he's proud of it.
No, I'm sure he is.
But it culminated on July 12th, 1979. Would be known as the day the disco died because there was an event called Disco Demolition Night. There was a couple of ingredients that ultimately made that recipe as foul as it was. And it was the owner of the White Sox, Bill Veeck. He decided to let this other guy, Steve Dahl. He and Steve Dahl came together. They were trying to find ways to promote the White Sox because they were sucking ass at this point in time. They were about to have a doubleheader at Kaminsky Park in Chicago. Any rock fan that comes to this doubleheader and brings at least a disco record, but you can bring as many as you want. If you bring a disco record, you get in for half price. And so they were expecting the crowd to go from about 20 to 25,000. Ultimately, 50,000 people ended up showing up. A crowd full of teens and rockers and punk rockers.
Yeah.
And this guy was parading around between the games in a Jeep with a bunch of paraphernalia that said fuck disco, and there were banners up everywhere. They compiled all these records and put, I think, dynamite in the barrel. They literally exploded it in center field. And the explosion caused such a riot, the entire crowd started rushing the field. There was fighting. There were people throwing fireworks at other people. Ultimately, it was broken up by the riot police. But the whole time, this guy is parading around the field screaming, disco sucks. A part that doesn't get talked about a lot, the entire game and the entire time that this was happening, the entire crowd was chanting very homophobic and racist things.